My name is Steve Wearsome. I am pleased to introduce to you Jim Covert. Jim was a teacher here and a football coach, and today's date is April 17, 2019. And Jim and I have been meeting together often, talking about this day and trying to put this together. So here we are, the day's finally come. Thanks for sitting in the chair, Jim. Can you tell me a little bit about your time here at Glenbard West? Like, how did you? I'd like to know, like, how did you apply? How did you hear about West? Do you remember getting that phone call? Who hired you?
Well, it's interesting. I had taught for 4 years and coached for 4 years before coming here, right out of college. And my last 3 years before I came to Glenbard West, I was at North Central College, and I was coaching and teaching and recruiting a lot. And I made the decision when they asked me to get into development, which was full-time, fundraising, and they said I could coach, and I said, well, I'll try it, but then there wasn't enough time to coach, so I really missed coaching. And I talked with my wife, and I said, do I really want to be in the college game, or do I want to go to high school where you can spend 90% of your time working with young people, and only maybe 10% of the time recruiting, in other words, encouraging them to come out for sports. So what I did was I let them know at North Central that I was going to be leaving, and they said, well, you can go back and still coach. We'll go back to your old job. And I said, well, thanks, but I'm going to look into high school. So I made a couple phone calls. There was a guy named Otis Vaughn, who was the athletic director here, and I made a direct phone call to Otis. And this was like in 1975. And then I called Lyons Township High School. J.O. Jackson was the head football coach there. I had done my student teaching over there in 1970, and told him that I was looking to get into high school. And Otis said, you know what, we might have an opening here. Coach Duchan is looking for an assistant coach, but we need to hire a head basketball coach. But we have a PE opening too. So I said, well, I'd be really interested. And I really didn't know much about Glenbard West. And then all of a sudden I got a call to come in for an interview. I couldn't believe it when I came here to this school, because I lived in Wheaton, southern Wheaton, but I really wasn't familiar with Glenbard West except that I knew about Coach Duchan. And so I was like a castle on a hill. I'm like, wow, this place is beautiful. And came and had my interviews with Dr. Elliott at the time, and Bill Duchan and Blaise Blasco. And about a week later, I got a call back, and they wanted to offer me a contract. And they hired a head basketball coach, but they got Kevin Moore, who was a history teacher. So that's how I got in the door, and I accepted the contract, I remember, and J.O. Jackson from LT called me and said he thought they had a job. Back in that day, it wasn't quite the process it is today. And I said, I already took a job. And he goes, where? I said, Glenbard West. He goes, Glenbard West? That's one of our worst rivals, And he says, did you sign a contract yet? And I said, no. He goes, well, you can get out of it, And I said, no, I'm really not going to do it, J.O. Thanks a lot, but, I met everybody there. I like the school, and I'm excited about the job. So that was it. And Dr. Elliott hired me, and then I worked with Coach Duchan on the varsity. Started that summer, because we had summer practices even way back then, and became a member of the PE department. And here I am. I taught 30 years, coached 30 years, and then I'm subbing here now. So I still like subbing.
So you started in 75, and when did you retire? Because I was
2005.
Because I was at that
2005.
retirement. Right.
So this is my 14th year as a sub, just at this school, because my sons went to school here. I still enjoy the students, and subbing's different than like what you do as a full timer, but I still enjoy the students very much.
14 years went fast.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow.
So let's go back to Coach Duchan, because I had forgotten that the two of you, your careers touched. Can you tell me a little bit about how uh, how he was as a coach, as a person, what kind of traits that maybe you picked up, because he built up a program,
He did.
and then you inherited it from him.
He did. And I always felt he was a disciplinarian. He wanted discipline. He wanted students to, athletes to want to improve, and they wanted a great effort out of them. And he wanted them to correct their mistakes, all good things. And, he wouldn't bend much on those principles at all. I always felt like he was a developer of character as well. And always had messages. We'd always meet in the locker room before we going out to practice, and then, afterwards, and we'd look at film, and there were always comments he would make about effort and success and improving yourself, and those things were all things I really believed in as well as a young athlete, so I bought into it very much myself. And I knew of his reputation, that he was a very successful coach, and he had built this program really out of not a winning program. So, but you're turning kids over every, it's not like a college where you can recruit, and it just keeps rolling along like Nick Saban. He gets kids flocking to him at Alabama, because they're winning. That doesn't happen in the high school ranks. You have the students you're getting, except maybe a few parochial schools today. The kids will go to those schools
Right.
with a winning tradition. But here in a public school, I was always very impressed with, that Coach Duchan had kept such a wonderful program going and built it and maintained it for so long.
Did he start the Hitters Club with the gold
He did.
helmets?
And that was in place when I came, and it was named after Bruce Capel, and who was a wonderful football player and a wonderful young man, and he went to University of Illinois and starred down there. In fact, a good friend of mine, Kenny Schreiner, who later became the head coach at Hinsdale Central, was a fraternity mate
Is that
of
right?
Bruce Capel, and they talked about him today still. He remembers him, but then he died in Vietnam. And so Coach Duchan established the Hitters Club in his memory, and the whole point of it was the effort and the physical play that denotes a really phenomenal football player, and that's what he was looking for. And so he would award the gold helmet, and once you got it, you never lost it.
What happened to that program? Because we don't do gold helmets anymore.
Well, I was with Coach Duchan for 2 years, and then I became the head coach in '77 at a young age, of age 27. And I really liked the gold helmet, but he had established it, and he wanted it to end at that point. So I was thinking, and the young men on the team who were coming up were like, Coach, what are we gonna have anything like that? So I set up a kind of a copycat thing in a way, but it's called the Silver Helmet Club and the 100 Club, and it was a saying that the successful man gives everything of himself each and every time he faces a challenge, and that was the overseeing motto on the board we made. And all three of us coaches on the varsity, myself, Tom Salerno, and Bernie Bothroyd, after watching film and a young man's play and how he handled himself in practice, and throughout the season we would award that silver helmet, and it would have 100 logos on the side.
What was the 100 for?
100%.
100%.
100%. And so we established that, and Mike Palma was the first recipient of that back in 1977, and then it became a big deal. I mean, a friend of mine, Pete Ventrilli at Downers Grove North, the head coach, asked if I would mind if they did a silver helmet deal for kind of the same situation. And I said, Pete, whatever you want to do in your program, I mean, I believe in that whole idea. The only thing I would say as I look back at it, though, in a way it became too big of a thing, in a way, because so many guys were striving for that, but not everybody got a silver helmet. And so in reflecting back on it after I'm retired, and talking to some of the guys who got their silver helmets, they kept them and they made lampstands out of them and things of that nature. But some of the ones who didn't get one have said, Coach, how come I didn't get one of those? And it almost became such an important deal that I maybe have taken away from the team concept a little bit. And so I'm not even sure if I were to start out today, if I would do that again. But at the time, it was very appropriate because of what Coach Duchan had established, that special award, and it worked out quite well. But in reflecting, we never put stars or anything on the helmets. The only people who got those awards were the prep team guys, the guys who helped in practice and help if we had a great game, scored 28 points, all the guys on the defensive prep team would get a star. But when you got a silver helmet, that was it.
Yeah, so I could see how that comes out of Duchan's legacy.
Right.
He retired, right? And then you became the head coach. Am I correct that your team was the first football team to bring us a state title? A state championship?
Well, in football, for sure.
Football, right?
Because the playoffs started back in 1974. That was my last year at North Central College.
What does it mean the playoffs started?
The state championships.
So we didn't
true
have-
state champions.
So we didn't have state
they
championships.
had mythical champions.
Okay.
Like Hinsdale was rated number one
So it was
in
ratings.
the Tribune in the 60s, and so they got a flag they put up that they
Okay.
were state champions.
But you didn't have to play a game to get that.
Right, yeah, exactly.
So for instance, like we have one of the famous pictures we have here is the football team in 1926, and they win the West Suburban Conference.
Right.
And so we have a picture of them standing in front of the doors. But they were champions, but that's all they could do. That they
Right,
could only
that's
win.
all that was really available back then. And in 74, that was the first year of the state playoffs. And I remember my first year here, 75, it was the second year, and we played Deerfield High School. And that's where I went to high school.
Oh, yeah.
And we played him here on Duchan. Wasn't Duchan Field at the time.
Yeah, right.
but it was our field, and we lost in a really close game.
Oh, yeah.
And I asked the head coach at Deerfield, who was an assistant coach when I was there, why did you go for it on fourth down on your own 18-yard line in the fourth quarter? And he goes, because you guys had just driven the ball 85 yards. And if we thought that if you got the ball back, we were going to lose the ball game. So I rolled the dice. And they got the first down and went on, and they won the game, and they won the state championship that year.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So that was in 75.
75. And in 76, my last year as an assistant with Bill, we went to the championship game and down at Illinois State University and lost in overtime to St. Lawrence. And that was for the state championship.
So go back to the game with Deerfield. You played
Yeah.
it here at Duchan. You didn't play it at the university?
No, that was during the playoffs.
Oh, during the
So
playoffs.
that wasn't the finals.
Oh, okay.
That was like the second round.
Okay, so you lost to Deerfield. Then the next year,
We lost to St. Lawrence in the championship game in
Okay.
overtime.
wow.
And I'll never forget, like Steve Pals, who went and played at Northwestern, fantastic young man. He was laying on the field. Marty Detmer went to Notre Dame, played there, was laying on the field. Johnny Odom, we have a lot of Odoms have gone
Yeah.
here. He went and played at Oklahoma State. We had a good team. He had got stopped when we went for 2 for the win.
Yeah.
And it was weird because I was so proud. It was over, and you're lifting these guys up off the field because they're so distraught because there's only one happy team in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing about the old days. Everybody who was a conference champion, they all felt like they could have been state champions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in the playoffs today, it's really hard to win a state championship. But that was an interesting experience. It was like 0 degrees down there.
Wow. So, but you had like your very first season. It was you were in the playoffs, and then again and again, and then tell me about your championship season.
Well, when I was coaching, we didn't. Not everybody. The playoffs, you had to be a conference champion to even get into the playoffs. Now they've expanded them, and I think for the better because there's a lot of excitement. But I remember we were in '82. We played for the conference championship against Oak Park and lost a heartbreaker.
Oh.
And we finished the season 7 wins and 2 losses. We didn't get in the playoffs. Today you're in.
Yeah.
You're in right away. 5 and 4 usually gets you in. The next year in '83, we had a lot of kids coming back, and we had a nice team, and we started winning ball games, and you have to win some close ones. We made the playoffs, started winning in the playoffs. We went to the semifinals, and the Player of the Year, Dempsey Norman from Tilden, Player of the Year in Illinois. He went to Michigan State. We stopped him, and in that game, one of our all-state players, Andy Andrzejczyk, whose sons went to school here now and played, he couldn't play. And so we brought in a junior tight end named Carl Pikus, and Dave Seidler, a big tackle, told him, Pikus, you better block, because if you don't, Carl told me that, and he played a great game because we were replacing a really good player. And one story there, we had the Swengros family. There's been 5 Swengroses who played here. And there's kids, still Swengros kids coming through this school.
There's a connection with the Sven
Oh,
Grosses
my gosh.
and the Capels.
Oh,
so
yeah.
we talk about
And
this
those
football hitter
families,
connection.
and I remember all 5 of them. 2 of them were when I was an assistant coach with Coach Duchamp. But in '83, Bobby Swengros got hurt in our green and white scrimmage. He was a starter. Finally comes back the 5th game of the year against York High School. He gets chop blocked as a middle linebacker, cracks the fibula on the outside, out again. He's a senior.
Yeah.
He's finally back for the playoffs, but we can't put him in right away. There's guys who've established their positions. At halftime of the semifinal game, we send Bobby onto the field, and you can hear the crowd roar. I mean, our fans were always very astute. They know what's going on. And he runs in, and it was on offense, and he makes a mistake. So we pull him off the field, and we yell at him a little bit, and he starts smiling. And I go, what are you smiling about, Bobby? And he goes, it's great to be yelled at again, Coach. And so the culmination of this story is in the state championship game at Dyke Stadium, because we played at Northwestern then. For 4 years they played that. We had an injury, and we shuffled it around at halftime, and Bobby went in to play middle linebacker, back at his original position. It's like one of those phony stories you'd see in the movies.
Yeah.
And he goes and plays a phenomenal game, making tackles all over the field. And we won the state championship over Peoria Limestone. And came home on the bus ride, and I remember everybody. It was an afternoon game, and coming back through town, and they finished the season 13-0 that year. So very special. Came back to the school. There was like a pep rally and an exciting moment. Time flies, but those guys still get together, and they remember that.
It's remarkable. In the pinnacle on your book, there's a great double spread of you, and then there's a player that's holding up a trophy.
Tommy Reitz, he was our captain.
Yeah.
Great player, wonderful young man. He lives out in Arizona now. He's in the building business and building homes all over the place. But he was our captain, really a fine young man.
When you come in now, do you see where it says like state champions? You see on the sign over by the school there?
I don't really look at that very much anymore. I mean, we've done so well. Chad Hetlett's had a couple great teams, championship teams. He's done a phenomenal job, and I love his staff now. And I know those guys because I've stayed connected with the school, and it's really pretty phenomenal. Our enrollment as a school is back up again now. When I first came, we were about 2,200. We went down to about 1,700, and now we're back up to 2,400. So
Makes a difference.
it does. Those 600 or 700 extra kids, half of them are boys. So you get a few more people interested in playing. So
Quite an interesting legacy we have here at West with Dushan and Covert and Hetlet. So I'd imagine boys that want to be football players, when they step onto Dushan Field and they put on the green and white uniforms, playing out there with the lake and with the fans and with
it's a
that
beautiful
legacy
setting, Steve.
has to be just.
I never got into the setting as much when I was coaching because I'd have headphones on. You got to get your plays in and everything. But after a game or when I was in the off season, or you drive by, and I mean, I run around that lake all the time, and it's just a beautiful setting. In fact, I think it was USA Today said it was one of the 10 most unique and beautiful settings to watch a football game, in the country.
It's just incredible. Just sitting up in the stands as a spectator.
Right.
It's such a pretty place. So, what an interesting career you had, because not only did you inherit this legacy program, then you continued its success, which is not always an easy thing to do. But then I want to talk a little bit about how Hollywood comes to Glenbard West. I was speaking with Bob Elliott's daughter, Jean, about how it almost didn't get filmed here. Lucas had some rough edges, and Dr. Elliott wanted some rewrites, and Hollywood said, okay, they would do it. Tell me, like, when you first heard about filming here and how they roped you in, because you did a lot of stuff with them.
Well, yeah, it was interesting because one of the things, they wanted to start shooting in May, and school's up and running, and senioritis and a lot of things going on at school, and testing and exams. So that was a big deal, and they actually shot some of the scenes up in Highland Park High School, where Dave Seltzer, the director, I think it was, that's where he was from originally, and they went to Arlington Heights to shoot the pep rally scene because they had just closed that school down in their district, so that was available for like the auditorium scene, but a lot of it was shot here. And all of a sudden, I had people, and the guy named Phil Wiley was worked with the whole production crew, come approach me at school and ask if I would be willing to get our student athletes involved. And there was a lot of football stuff, and I thought, well, it's the end of school. We always have a week break before we get our summer program going anyway. And so I said I would get involved and see if these guys wanted to be involved. Of course, everybody wanted to be involved. And so there was even some college guys who'd played for us, a couple of them who came back, said, can I be on the football scenes? So we had the football scenes all set up and had to shoot all those, and they would ask me questions like, what would a mean coach, say to a little guy here? And I gave them something they could say on the screen, but they actually used it.
Is that right?
The coach goes, when Lucas talks to him, he says, be quiet, you little pissant. I mean, which was pretty rough back in the day. And just things of that nature, and then setting up a few scenes and routes and, running scenes. And so that was interesting. And Charlie Sheen said he wanted to, he had played baseball, he was a pretty good athlete, and he wanted to do some football scenes. And so we let him do a football scene or two. And in fact, one time he made a catch on a curl pattern, and he got tackled pretty hard, and he got upset. And he took his helmet and flipped it. And the whole set went quiet. And the helmet hit the ground, and everybody's looking at him, and nobody ran to pick up the helmet. And, because these are all high school football players, and it's like, and so he went over and picked it up, and we reshot it, and we had a young man named Chris Hart, whose daughter is a runner here right now, state championship
Caitlin
runner,
Hart.
Caitlin. Chris was a quarterback from a state championship team, and he had come back. He ran. They sprayed his hair.
Oh, yeah.
And he ran the curl, caught the ball, got nailed. No big deal, and so that was an interesting situation. And then Jeremy Bevins, I think it is.
Jeremy Piven.
Piven, yes. He had played at Evanston.
Evanston local, right?
Yes, played at Evanston, and he said he wanted to do the running back scenes. So we had him do his toss sweep, and we had some really good players out there. One of them was Andy Andrazik, who was at Duke at the time, on a full scholarship. He came up and put a hit on him, and one of the guys said, and then Cruz said, "Oh, you better be careful, Jeremy. You might get injured." So he decided he better not do a lot of those scenes. But so those were a couple incidents that I thought were interesting, because the guys who were in the movie business, upcoming young men who are stars, they like sports, but they didn't want to get hurt either, because it ruins the movie. Then what do you do?
Now, right,
You got
yeah.
all this money tied up, cameramen and sound people and everything.
There's so much to talk about and unpack, and I don't want to get away from how the scene, the movie ended, and it didn't sit quite right. Do you remember how it ended and how it changed? Because there were some things in there. You're telling me stories about shirts that you gave to people and how they used that as inspiration for the jacket scene at the end.
They had a test audience. I remember a few of us went down to watch dailies, like Corey Haim was Lucas, the little guy, and he made the catch and got hit, and that scene went really well. They had like 5 or 6 cameras on him, and they didn't want to reshoot it because they caught it, and he got kicked in the head a little bit, because his helmet, he didn't have his helmet on when it all happened. So that's how he got injured. And he was in the hospital at the end. And they actually had him initially turning into a severe situation where he was injured and wasn't going to maybe make it, and had that shown to a test audience. They didn't like the ending. So what we had done, we had the 100 Club, Silver Helmet Club, 100 Club t-shirt that we'd award to, young men when they got the silver helmet, which I talked about earlier. Well, we had a couple t-shirts. We gave them out, one to Corey Haim at the end, and one to Charlie Sheen, and a couple of the guys who really were involved in the movie, and everybody gave them a big hand. They seemed to really like that. So what happens was, they kind of looked at that idea, and in February, they came back and shot the ending. And it was winter, and so they had like a couple guys were in other movies, and they had them wear baseball caps and that type of thing, and they had it all lit up front of the entrance, so it looks like, nice weather. And they had Corey Haim came in and went to his locker, opened his locker, and there was a letter jacket in it that he'd earned his letter. And there was that
Slow clap.
Yeah, that clap thing started, and different guys in the hallway who were on the team and other people, and so they made it a much more uplifting ending to a story, and I think that was a much better ending.
So you think the writers were inspired by the T-shirt and
could be,
and the clapping?
They just thought of something, a way to make it positive,
Yeah, right. Anything else that is coming to mind? You went through your career and through Lucas.
One thing that happened at Lombard West back in 91, it was amazing. After Lucas, the movie, there was a Fox television show shot here called Yearbook. And it was one of the first reality television shows, and it was on TV every week. And a lot of our football things were involved.
That's right, you were in that as well.
And they did a story on one of our football players whose mom had cancer and needed a transplant, and they were in our locker room, and they were following us everywhere, which was very different. And another story was about our quarterback, what it was like to be in his position, Mark Husky, who to be in that situation, and they followed him around, and that was an episode. Another one with Marlon Golden, who was a wide receiver, had 2 homecoming dates, which was horrible, but it was kind of a comedy at the end because he ended up with not being able to go with either one of them. So that came about, and that was about Glenbard high school life, and one of the first reality television shows. But I remember that very much because they'd follow us around to practice and into the locker room, which was very different. You got used to it after a while, but it was different in the spring when it came on television, because everybody here at school would watch it was a weekly show.
Yeah.
So that was very unique. And I will say that as I reflect back, as I've had people ask me this, I've never seen young people work as hard as they do, like in football program or any sport. It could be that way with band or competition or forensics or anything, where they put in so much effort, and like in a football game, only 50% are rewarded at the end of the day. I'd always emphasize to them that if you work this hard in everything you do, you'll probably be happy 85, 90% of the time. You'll get payback. But in football, it's 50-50. Half the teams win, half lose. And I was always impressed with all of the team's efforts, no matter what the ability level, but the effort that was extended in practice and in games. Week after week, year after year. And that's kind of what hits me as I think about, is there a difference today or when I coached or when Coach Duchamp coached? Not really. The equipment might have changed a little bit, but that aspect of the game, the amount of effort that's put in each week in preparation for a contest, and the effort that's expended, that's the thing that athletes can call back on when they're ex-athletes, to help them through different times in their life. Maybe when they put a good effort in and lose a job interview, or they get sick or something goes wrong, how do they bounce back? And I see that as being like a eternal quality benefit from being involved in, especially a team sport.
You touched so many people with what you did on the field and off the field, and had such an extraordinary career working with the movies and then with your book. What do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered?
As a sub here now, it has been a long time since I coached, but when I'm in the special ed wing and working with those kids, and in the morning they go, "Hi, coach. Hi, coach." That's how I'd like to be remembered.
They weren't even born when you retired.
Yeah, that's right. And I've seen sons and daughters of my former players come through here, and a lot of times, it's, "Hey, coach, how are you, coach?" And to me, the coach is a good word, and that's a good way to be remembered, because most coaches, and we all make mistakes, but we really like to see young people flourish and grow in their talents, and also in what they learn, and how they treat other people, and teammates, and all those things you carry away, the residual effects of the actual competition. So
You're really connected with the large family of students and athletes here.
Glenbard West is an amazing school, and really it's been, meant a lot to me. I live 5 minutes from school still, and I really don't have to be here, but I still choose to come and help out and sub here and there, and it's all about the young people.